Thank you for viewing my presentation on Chapter 10's Gorman's summary on 1 Corinthians. I'm featuring the Word on the Cross, which covers Chapter 1, verse 18 through Chapter 2, verse 5. According to Gorman, Pauline scholars consider this section to be the most important of all of Paul's writings. Saul demonstrates his case against worldly wisdom as something ill-equipped to perceive the sophistication of Yahweh's wisdom. Here, Professor Gorman refers to as the charismatic paradox. In other words, preaching an opinion that is true yet contrary to popular expectations of the Greeks, particularly Corinthians. Saul refers to the wise people in many cultures that find Moses and the prophets lacking in credibility. For some examples of anti-Israelite literary criticism, one can read Josephus' Against Apion and an anthology of polemics on Israelite literature entitled The Interpretation of the New Testament in Greco-Roman Paganism by John Granger Cook. Saul's writing here is reminiscent of rabbinical debates in the Hillel Academy from where he graduated. Saul often makes use of contradictions or opposites to illustrate his arguments. For example, foolishness with wisdom, flesh with spirit, Hagar with Sarah. Verse 19, he quotes the prophets Isaiah, Job, and Jeremiah regarding confounding the wisdom of the world. Part 2, wisdom of the Greeks is foolishness. And here in verse 20, Saul invites the Corinthians to recruit their homiletical and or rhetorical masters to challenge him, a Pharisee from Judea. Corinth is an ancient city-state with an active cult philosopher population. Debate was also conducted in writing, for example, against Apion. So the challenge was authentic. Israelite scholars have often dealt with detractors such as Manetho, the Egyptian priest from the Ptolemaic period. Verse 21, Craig Keener mentions in his New Cambridge Bible Commentary on Corinthians that Saul disapproved of orators who value persuasive skill over truth. This verse is radically underappreciated in this current era of the West's dependency on rationalist thought. Verse 22, for indeed Jews ask for signs and Greeks search for wisdom. Notice Saul did not say the Greeks possessed wisdom, but searched for her. The Judeans asked for signs indicating the higher spiritual sensibilities due to the possession of the Torah. Verse 23, but we preach Christ crucified, to Jews a stumbling block, and to Gentiles foolishness. Verse 22 and verse 23 are literary parallel, where Judeans are corresponding with the spiritual signs and stumbling block. The Greeks are corresponding with wisdom and foolishness. These literary parallels are also paradoxes which demonstrate the failings of both ethnic groups. Part 3, social harmony and boasting. Begins in verse 28. And the base things of this world are despised, and God has chosen the things that are not, so that he may nullify the things that are. The despised of God has chosen here features the marginalized Judeans or Israelites in diaspora who possess the true wisdom which is considered foolishness among the Greeks. The synagogue at Corinth contained many followers of Yeshua, including the Nazi Crispus. See Acts chapter 18, verses 1, 4, 5, and 8. The congregation of believers is described as a cross-section of Corinthians and Judeans, across social strata too. Professor Gorman, on page 238, explains this as an opportunity God has taken to subvert the Greeks' status quo by reversing their social order to favor the poor and oppressed. Verse 29 deals with the boasting issue. And Saul issues this reminder to the disciples at Corinth to be humble regardless of their position, for their sanctification, righteousness, and status in the kingdom of heaven is complete mercy. So the only boasting permissible is in the Lord. Part 4, rhetoric, homiletics, and philosophy, beginning chapter 2, verse 1. Professor Gorman reiterates Saul's reliance upon the power of the Spirit and not upon clever human devised strategies such as homiletics, rhetoric, to persuade people of the credibility of the gospel. Thank you for listening to this presentation.